In March of 2020, my life changed forever. And weirdly enough, it had nothing to do with the pandemic. After 6 months of terrible biking habits, my body finally decided that it wanted one thing: revenge. The cartilage in my knees was like, "Hey, wanna see a magic trick? Wanna see me disappear?" And I was like, no, thank you. And my knees were like, too bad! And that's the story of how I got contra malacia. I've always been the couch used to potatoes, yet suddenly, now that I was injured, I missed being able to run, to kneel, to just sit with my legs crossed without getting stabbed by my own knees. Sometime after I became disabled, I decided to rewatch my favorite anime, My Hero Academia. And because I was revisiting it through the lens of disability, it changed the way I thought about the show. In order to understand the role disability has in My Hero Academia, I first gotta make sure that you all know what disability even means. So disability is defined as a physical or mental condition that substantially limits a person's movements, senses, or activities. We all have limits. It just so happens that some of us happen to have more than others. As much as I want to fly by flapping my arms or leap 100 feet into the air like the flea that I am, like I can in my dreams, I can't do that. No one can. But it's important to know that while disabilities produce great challenges, there's usually ways to work around them. Using this definition, Deku is basically disabled throughout the entire story. For most of his life, Deku's powerless in a way that his peers are not. Even after getting a quirk, he has to work harder than most people at his school. After all, his own body and abilities are working against him. This in itself is a pretty good metaphor for disability, but Hiroaka doesn't stop there. For example, can we talk about how insane this child is? Deku once broke each of his individual fingers and then broke both of his arms and a leg and double broke a couple fingers after that, all just to help someone else use his own powers to the fullest. And then he got absolutely thrashed by said kid, and he did it with a smile on his face. like what even is this child? Despite Izuku's intentions, this reckless style of heroism has to come to an end. After breaking his bones several times too many, he receives some very frightening news. The ligaments in his arm are fraying beyond repair. Doctors warned him, the scars on his arm warned him, and he ignored it all to keep saving others. But this incident finally knocks some sense into him. Deku now has hard limits. He can't use danger as an excuse anymore. If he uses his full powers again, eventually, he will lose the use of his arm. A few months after I became disabled, I started using the exercise bike at the gym. To strengthen my legs, I would spin away very gently at the machine while using cartoons to trick my brain into forgetting I was exercising. I decided on a whim to rewatch My Hero Academia. Eventually, I landed on the episode that I just mentioned. I watched Deku's face, truly shaken from the news about his arm, knowing that his life had changed forever. And suddenly, I saw myself in him. In many ways, his story was now mine. After this episode, Deku remembers that he has legs. I laughed at this moment until I remembered the time I took a self-defense class. We had a mock knife fight with foam weapons, which, by the way, is how I got into a knife fight with my teacher. Just in case you wanted to know. And I kept forgetting that I could use both arms and legs to fight. Like, I literally forgot that my right arm existed. I was just, like, flailing around my left arm. Just entirely forgetting that I could kick, too. Anyway, Deku learns to use the other parts of his body to take the load off of his arms. He continues developing control over his quirk to only use the amount of power his body can handle. He uses special sleeves and guards to support his arms. In a similar fashion, I got pretty dang good at avoiding my worst enemy: stairs. I started doing low-impact exercises. Rather than trying to force myself to kneel, I'd just sit my butt on the ground. Yeah, I mean, hey, no shame in that. That's what butts are for. That's terrible. I also, begrudgingly, started setting personal boundaries. I tried not to pressure myself into looking normal and just did what I knew wouldn't hurt me. I even got a cane about a year ago and immediately slapped a bunch of stickers on it because that's how you feel better about your mobility aids. And this was huge for me since I hate attention. Like Deku, I had to learn to work within my body's new limits. I found new ways of doing things. I had to work smarter, not harder. Okay, so you've made it this far into the video, so you're probably not clicking off now, which means that I've reeled you in. I've got you now. Now, it's Rangent time, baby! During the villain hunt arc, Deku strikes out on his own. He takes basic survival items in his little backpack, Gran Torino's scarf, and starts Batmaning the heck out of bad guys. He experiments with his powers, discovers new mutations from it, and finds more efficient ways of fighting. All of this is great, except for a couple key things. He refuses to take breaks, he won't shower, barely eats food, and basically has deleted the word self-care from his dictionary. He understands that he shouldn't sustain physical injuries, at least, but that's about it. Despite everyone telling him, "Hey, you can't fight baddies if you pass out," he just keeps on trucking. In some ways, he's regressed. He's fallen back on old thinking patterns. Before this point in the story, Deku looks like an approachable, helpful, heroic boy. But because of the whole regression thing, his image starts to shift. He goes from sweet little green bean to shambling, single-minded, Springtrap-looking thing. People start to whisper about a terrifying entity with grungy, tattered clothing and intense gaze, whose lightning reflexes take out enemies in one strike. They say there's a masked villain who stalks these very streets. But wait, isn't that the guy that saved Hanako and her cat yesterday? Deku becomes a sort of urban legend where even civilians don't know whose side he's on. And this character design change is something that, absolutely fascinates me. If you want to see me nerd out about the specifics, you can take a look at the screen. But this direct parallel between ignoring limits and toxic heroism is just so interesting to me. But, yet again, Deku has to remember that he's human. Well, metahuman, I guess. He collapses halfway through a fight, and the only reason he survives it is because his friends came to bail him out. From this experience, he starts to realize that he not only can, but should rely on others for help. He can't do everything alone. My Hero Academia is asking a fascinating thematic question, one that I hadn't recognized when I was able-bodied. The characters hear the phrase plus ultra over and over again. Go beyond, break through your natural limits, don't hold back, because that's just what heroes do. All of the best heroes live by this rule, and a lot of villains too. All Might, Aizawa, Deku, they're all so willing to break themselves to protect others. They do it because innocent lives are at stake, because it's literally their job, and if they don't finish the fight, who will? And sometimes they successfully go beyond and discover their true strength. But every single one of them becomes disabled or disfigured in the process. They end up with more limits, not fewer. All Might is a good example of this. He starts the story missing an organ or two with only 3 hours of muscle bod time per day. He routinely overexerts himself while using his muscle form, and with every life-threatening battle against a villain, All Might's powers wane. He ends up going into early retirement. He grapples every day after that about how, or even if, he can help others. And so, the story asks a very pointed question. Is plus ultra really a heroic philosophy? The warring ideologies of go beyond and stay within your limits is also my everyday battle. I'm torn between these two ideas. I want so badly to go plus ultra. I want to be normal again. I hate not knowing my limits until I've already passed them. I'm sick of constantly knowing that one wrong movement might send a knife through my kneecaps. And I hate it when people treat me like an incompetent baby when they learn that I'm disabled. But if I don't want to make things worse, I have to take care of myself. I need to find the balance between getting stronger and recognizing my limits. So, the question still remains. When is it beneficial to go beyond? What are the limits to plus ultra? And how many times can you break your limits before your limits break you? Hey, thanks for sticking around to hear my incoherent ramblings. Remember to do all the YouTube stuff to feed the algorithm overlord. Feed me! Join us. In all seriousness, though, I genuinely want to hear your thoughts in the comments. What are you thinking about? How do you balance pushing limits and staying within them? Because I need to know, please. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!